Hello, my name is Kiriath, and today we're going to talk about the inevitable march of the Primaris, because, well, yeah, no, that's fair. This is also talking about the Deathwatch stuff that has cropped up again. So, a couple of weeks ago, there was a French YouTube channel that sort of leaked/rumoured some stuff about upcoming Deathwatch Codex and how the Primaris Marines were going to take a large role in this. And to be honest, at the time, I sort of looked at it and I thought to myself, I don't really count any of this as rumours, because the main parts of it just seemed like what was going to happen anyway. I mean, there was a little bit of fuss kicked up about the fact that Primaris were going to start taking centre stage and stuff, but some of the actual information was things like being able to take mixed Primaris units, stuff like that. Stuff that, frankly, would make sense in a Deathwatch Codex. If you're going to fully integrate Primaris into the Deathwatch, you will most likely allow mixed units, and let's face it, they were never going to not be introduced properly into the new Codex, because they're already usable with Deathwatch as it is. The update of, I think it was July last year, made it so that Primaris could be included in Deathwatch. They just didn't have any of the special rules. They're just Primaris Marines in Deathwatch colours. So that side of things, I mean, we didn't talk about it largely because I didn't really see what there was to talk about. I mean, Primaris being the focus of a new Deathwatch Codex, that was just going to happen regardless, and Primaris being introduced properly, again, it was just going to happen regardless. But since that time, Valrak has come back off holiday, I think, and he made a video covering these rumours. At the moment, to be honest, there's only really one source for this stuff, which is another YouTube channel, and then Valrak has sort of moved the information onto his audience, which is fine, but I haven't seen anything else really corroborating it, so to speak, and I wasn't really going to talk about it because it just seemed like a kind of, well, yeah, situation. But rather than talk about the rumours themselves, I wanted to talk a little bit about the kind of, I guess, the reaction that I've seen, some of the comments that I've seen regarding kind of the resurgence of the rumours, with Valrak bringing it back into the spotlight a little bit. I've seen quite a lot of people basically talking about how they don't like the idea of the Primaris getting all of the spotlight, how Deathwatch are kind of unique enough and special enough in their own way that bringing out a Deathwatch Codex and then making it all about the Primaris kind of takes away the thing that makes Deathwatch so interesting. And to be honest, in that regard, I agree. The thing is, I kind of agree with that, whilst also admittedly feeling bad about it. I feel like this is something that you've just got to get used to, because this isn't going to be the last time this happens. Okay, so the Primaris being integrated properly into the Deathwatch and actually having Deathwatch specific rules and having Deathwatch specific combinations of units, I do not see a problem with that. If you're going to put an army into another army, the way that Primaris have been integrated into other forces, then do it properly. That's how that should work. In an army as unique and as different and as kind of drastically separate from your standard Space Marine chapters, just having a squad of intercessors walking around is lazy as hell. It's not interesting, it's not flavourful, it doesn't add anything to the army as a whole. Actually allowing Primaris Marines to take unique weapons, to actually take Deathwatch weapons, to mix and match what they have in a squad, that adds flavour, not to the Deathwatch particularly, because I don't think the Deathwatch needs that, but the Primaris need that, because the Primaris, whilst I really like most of the models, I still don't really like the aggressors or the reavers, but the rest of them are fine. They need bringing up. They need to become a bit less bland. I think one of the biggest things that I found with the introduction of the Primaris is the sheer kind of proliferation of them. They're just everywhere. They're in every part of everything. They came out of nowhere, and now you cannot go anywhere without seeing something about the Primaris Marines, and it becomes very homogenous and very dull very quickly. And I don't think enough was done to temper that. With something like the Deathwatch, you actually have an opportunity to give the Primaris more personality. You have the opportunity to give them something that's a bit outside the norm, actually make them into unique characters, actually take those really great base models and do interesting things with them. I mean, that's one of the best things about the Deathwatch as an army. It's so customizable, and you can create so many different unique characters and interesting units. Not allowing that to be done with Primaris would be a complete waste. It would be a missed opportunity, and it would be a massive missed opportunity if you didn't take advantage of how the Deathwatch works to finally spice Primaris up a little bit. The thing is that whilst that would be good, and I would like to see that, I also wouldn't like to see that be the focus. I've seen people saying things like it's going to be Codex Primer Watch. That would not sit well with me, because I don't feel like the Deathwatch needs that. The Deathwatch are as kind of unique as they are without the need to throw in the hole, and now they have even more super special good soldiers. They don't need that added element. They are as extraordinary as they are without that just shoved in. And I suppose that's another worry, if anything, that there will not be sufficient justification for the Primaris to start kind of joining the ranks. I mean, after all, these are supposed to be incredible veterans, not just random mass-manufactured guys, which is what the Primaris, let's face it, pretty much are. The main thing that is getting me about reading a lot of the comments and stuff in response to these rumours circulating for a second time is the sheer number of people who are just outright saying, I really don't want Primaris to be the focus. I'm sick of Primaris, I'm not interested in Primaris, or I don't feel like the Deathwatch needs Primaris, which actually is a point that I think I would agree with. I think the Primaris need the Deathwatch much more than the other way around in terms of making armies or units interesting or different. But there seems to be this kind of weird attitude that that people thought that this army would be left alone. Everyone else has got them, but Grey Knights and Deathwatch, I thought they wouldn't have them. I mean, at this point, I'm sorry, but you kind of, if you have that mindset, if you have that attitude, you kind of need to face the fact that that's not the case. Games Workshop hasn't introduced the Primaris range and introduced the concept of the Primaris to, throw them at you for a year and a bit and then just be like, and now we're just going to leave it. That's not what they've done. They haven't set out to create a small range that they will never expand and that will be forgotten about in a couple of years' time. It's kind of, to me anyway, I think it's kind of obvious that Primaris is the new baseline, it's the new standard. They are the new poster boys. The original Space Marines will slowly be phased out. They won't get any more units, like any new units. They won't get any new vehicles. They won't get any new special characters, most likely. We're not going to see a downturn in how much Games Workshop are pushing Primaris. That's not going to happen. You're going to see a downturn in how much they are pushing Standard Marines. And Deathwatch are, let's face it, Standard Marines. Yes, they are very fancy looking Standard Marines. They are way better sculpts than the normal Standard Marines, but they're just normal Marines all the same. And that's not enough now. The standard of the normal Marines, it's past. Primaris are now the new baseline. They are the ones that are going to get promoted the shit out of. They are the ones who are going to get the most new units over the next few years. They're the ones who are going to see their roster expand, most likely anyway. And eventually, the standard kits will be phased out and Primaris will be all that's left. So, Deathwatch will have Primaris, obviously. They can already take them anyway. And if you're holding out for the idea that Grey Knights will be left alone, because after all, Grey Knights can't take Primaris, that, I'm afraid, probably isn't going to happen either. The only thing is, Grey Knights is going to take longer. To me, the only reason that Primaris are being fully supported for the Deathwatch Codex, provided the rumours are true, which they most likely are because it would make the most sense. If they're going to implement them properly, they are going to implement them properly, and so you'll be able to create fancy Deathwatch Primaris Marines. The fact is that they are incredibly easy to introduce, to turn into that particular sub-faction, because all it takes is a shoulder pad and a new arm. All it takes is another couple of weapon sprues and you have what you want. You have Deathwatch Primaris. Grey Knights will most likely happen as well. Grey Knight Primaris is almost guaranteed to happen at some point in the future, but it's just not as simple. It's very simple to convert Primaris into Deathwatch. You only need a couple of parts. It's a lot harder to convert Grey Knight into Primaris because they have a completely different style. Their armour is not the same armour. Their weapons are not the same weapons. It's given how Terminator heavy for a start Grey Knights are. How do you go about just sticking Primaris in there? You can't really. But it will happen at some point. There is no faction for Space Marines that is sacred, that is going to be left alone by the Primaris threat. You're just going to end up with Primaris in every single army because they are what Games Workshop has chosen to take over from the older line of Space Marines. And in fairness, they look better. They look better, the scale is proper. You can see why they do it, and it also, let's face it, has ignited a resurgence in Space Marines. Space Marines were never not popular, they've always sold the best, but you cannot move for Primaris progress pictures on every website ever at this point. Most of the people that I follow on Twitter, most of the things I come across on things like Pinterest, a lot of the forums and different subreddits and stuff, I cannot remember the last time I saw someone doing a in-progress picture of a brand new Space Marine Tactical Squad. I have lost count of how many new Intercessors or Hellblasters or Inceptors or Captains in Gravis armour I've seen. That's just the way it's going to go, and I guess it's kind of weird to me in a way because I understand the reluctance to accept that Primaris are going to be the thing that carries the Space Marine torch from this point forward. But on the other hand, it's too obvious, it's too clear, it's too... Just from the way Games Workshop has been pushing them, it's too much of a sure thing to think that anything else could happen at this stage, I think is what's getting me. So when it comes to rumours of a Deathwatch Codex that focuses on Primaris, when it comes to rumours that Primaris will be able to take mixed units, that they'll have special Deathwatch rules and weapons, well, yeah, of course they will. They're going to be finally implemented properly. And that means giving them the Deathwatch treatment, which means making Primaris a bit more interesting, making Deathwatch arguably a little more bland, and it is one step further to making sure that the Space Marine range is essentially dominated by the Primaris lineup. And that's the way it's going to stay for the foreseeable future. And most likely, after a while, I don't know how many... I wouldn't want to try and estimate, months or years or whatever, but eventually that's all we'll see, because that's where Games Workshop's focus is going to be from this point on. I would not be surprised to learn that the Primaris stuff outsells the normal Space Marine stuff by a significant margin at this point, because one other thing that I think is fairly important to remember when you talking about this kind of thing is the internet is not the only place where people who play this hobby reside. The internet is not the only place where collectors sit to talk about this stuff. The internet is not representative of 100% of the customers of Games Workshop. So when you see 20 people having a big kind of discussion and agreement that Primaris are garbage and no one buys them, I would argue that a significant number of people, more than that, have already bought a shitload of Primaris stuff. I mean, it's part of the old cycle, obviously. Games Workshop pushes something really hard, so it sells really well, so they make more of it, so they push it really hard. That's just how that works, and 9 times out of 10 it's Imperium stuff that they do it with. But yeah, of course they're going to be in Codex Deathwatch, of course there's going to be things like mixed units, and of course they're not going to go anywhere, and of course they're going to take over Grey Knights as well. That's what Games Workshop wants, and people keep buying it, and so they're going to keep doing it. That's just the way that works, and it's weird to see so many people outright declare that it's not, or say that it's incorrect that it's the case. It's kind of not right or wrong. Games Workshop just follows the money, and they've invested a lot of time and effort into making Primaris successful, and they've succeeded, and so they will continue from this point onwards. Anyway, that got very rambly towards the end, didn't it? I guess the question is, for you guys, do you share that viewpoint that Primaris are just going to take over eventually? That once they're integrated properly into the Deathwatch, which they will be, they will then be integrated into the Grey Knights, that we will eventually see the end of the current Space Marine lineup, and that it will be Primaris for days? You kind of got my opinion on it. I want to know what yours is, so let me know in the comments below. In the meantime, thank you very much for watching, and feel free to click the two things there. Click them if you like, don't click if you don't want to, and I will see you for the next one. Toodaloo.